In today's video, I have a very exciting one for you guys. Not only do we see the very extreme cold air moving in for next week, but we also have stronger signals at longer range cold on the models. So basically from start to finish, we're going to see very cold air on these models. Not only that, we've seen an increase from all of the models on snowiness around the nation, including the Ohio Valley, Midwest, Great Lakes, Southeast, Mid-Atlantic, Northeast, basically everybody getting some form of snowfall over the next few weeks. And really, we've seen a drastic increase for the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast, according to these models. Super exciting stuff. Multiple potential major snowstorms here to look at. So let's take a look at the 6 to 10 day outlook really briefly here. This is for the 21st through the 25th of January, and we see very cold air for this South Central, Southeast, Mid-Atlantic, and even into a bit of the Northeast corridor. In reality, likely all of these areas will be pretty far below normal during this time frame. As we look at the precipitation, we see that it's not necessarily going to be above average for these areas, and the models don't even show above average precipitation, but enough comes up into this area at the correct times to result in snowfall. So this is the 21st through the 25th here, above average for the deeper south. This area has a really good shot at seeing some snowfall over the next couple of weeks here. 8 to 14 day outlook. This will be for the 23rd through 29th of January, and we see continued cold in pretty similar areas here, and also pretty similar above average precipitation for this south central southeast corridor, where again these areas are going to have a really good shot at seeing snowfall over the next 23rd to 29th here. Let's take a look at the past 15 days, and we see that this is going to be basically the 2nd of January through the 16th. Now we won't get a full look until the 20th, so that'll be our next edition. So we'll be able to look at the 1st through the 20th of January, eventually being able to look at the whole month once it's all said and done. But really cold for these areas. Obviously, we're talking about a whole 15-day period here. So when you see probably 5 to 7 degrees below average for these areas, and we're talking more like 7 to 12 degrees below average for the greens, that is on the very extreme end of the spectrum when we're talking about a 15-day period. So very impressive cold so far, and it's actually going to get even colder here for next week and potentially beyond. So let's take a look at the European model. We're going to kind of start with this model. Again, there will be some differences between the European and GFS, but both have increased the amount of not only cold, but also just snowstorm frequency. And it's really one of the best model runs I've ever seen if you're hoping for snowfall, because I can basically show everybody opportunities for snowfall. There is really no snow hole here in the eastern half of the nation. So let's move through it. We have some snow showers ongoing for the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic as we speak. We're kind of in a warmer in the west, cold in the east pattern. We're going to briefly warm up here for the 17th, 18th, 19th, as we've discussed. And this is going to be basically the only warm period that we look at on this model run for the most part. We do get a low moving up towards the Great Lakes. This will bring some snowfall. Here, it's all coming underneath our primary low up here in Canada. So snowfall for Canada, the Ohio Valley, some of the Mid-Atlantic, and the Great Lakes, as well as our cold air is moving back in. Thunderstorms for the deep south and southeast could potentially occur. We get this low setting up for Sunday afternoon as well. This one looking to start up somewhere offshore of North Carolina, and we start to get signs of snowfall for all of these areas. So this is really when the Mid-Atlantic and Northeast is going to start to flourish. If this solution is indeed correct, which most models show at this point. And we see coastal areas of the Mid-Atlantic and the kind of southern New England area as well, seeing decent snowfall. Then for the 21st, here comes our Western Gulf low, where we're going to start to see potential snowfall for Texas, Louisiana, down by the coast. That would be absolutely insane. Again, this is the European model. It moves down through the southeast, where we get more Gulf Coast snowfall for Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Florida Panhandle, and then the whole southeast coast, basically from coastal Georgia up through coastal South Carolina into coastal North Carolina, and even Virginia gets snowfall for Wednesday morning very early. And then it basically moves out. I do see the potential at this point for this storm to be around here, obviously, and give these deeper south areas nice snowfall. I do see the potential for it to trend further offshore, which would lead to less areas seeing snowfall. And I do still see the potential for these to trend actually further towards the coast, which would unlock a lot more areas to see snowfall in these corridors. So basically, there's still a lot on the table, but we are basically 5-6 days away. So these trends have about 2 to 3 days to take place before we're almost certainly locked into something. So good signs for these deep south areas during that storm on this European model. We basically move on. We start to get some low pressure building around the 25th again offshore of the southeast and mid-Atlantic. We initially get snowfall for North Carolina, Virginia, the Delmarva here around that date. That one moves out innocently after dropping probably a dusting to a couple of inches for those areas. As we move towards the 27th, 28th, this is when things get really interesting. Tuesday the 28th, we get kind of a brief warm up, and then we get this low kind of traveling underneath the jet stream here, taking place somewhere around the Smoky Mountains on this model. Again, location isn't too crucial at this point, but snowfall for somebody, in this instance, is a lot of the Ohio Valley into the mid-Atlantic. And this storm on this model will move closer to the coast. We start to see it get a lot heavier as it crosses over those Smoky Mountains for Tennessee, Kentucky, Ohio, West Virginia, Virginia, Pennsylvania, Maryland, DC, New Jersey. This one moves offshore, becomes a huge, massive winter storm for these areas, dropping likely a foot plus for some areas as it moves offshore. That would be an absolute monster. Moves up after a few hours. So again, that would be kind of like the late January timeframe. And then this is the end of the model run that we're looking at here, but we start to get more formation in here, and we have continued warmth in the west. So this positive PNA is prevailing, and this cool down moves into the east overall. Very, very interesting. Let's take a look at the GFS, look for some similarities, maybe some differences, as I mentioned as well. We move towards this potential snow system again, starting out in the Ohio Valley, Canada, Northeast, and then we get that secondary low setting up there offshore of the Mid-Atlantic, moving up into the Northeast, and it's a pretty similar look. This one is a lot more good for snowfall totals along the Mid-Atlantic and into the Northeast here. So again, a little better with the snowfall totals, but a similar track. But the only difference is for this 21st, 22nd system, we do miss out on it. So again, that solution where it's just too far offshore is taking place here. We don't really get any of the snowfall down here. We don't get any of the snowfall really for the most part along the southeast coast either. But it's important to note that the GFS model does have a southeast bias. So this might be showing it too far southeast, as it tends to do sometimes. The European model would have a lot more snowfall for these areas. Let's move past this though. So we found a key difference there within 6 or 7 days. So we have some time to come together on that. This system, we do get this kind of swing around system here for the 23rd, 25th, and we see the Ohio Valley, the Mid-Atlantic starts to get snowfall, and we do end up with a coastal low. It's not quite as intense, and it's much closer to the coast, so we get a lot of mixing for the immediate coastal areas in here. But this would still be a very decent snow event for somebody. This is at the like kind of 8-9 day range. So again, there's a lot of time for movement. I wouldn't really consider any of these two solutions on this to be the final solution. There will likely be some adjustments on these models over the coming days, but to see a coastal low on both models kind of near the 23rd, 24th time frame is going to be a good signal to watch. We do see that one move out. And then we get some coastal activity. It's kind of weird. We get a lot of broad low pressure in here and just activity, but it's never able to latch up with this jet stream that is very close, by the way, for about the Saturday 25th time frame. We'll be watching this. Obviously, this could very easily be a little further north, and this would be a much bigger situation. But for right now, it's not showing that, but that'll fluctuate with every model run, basically. And then we end up with a more kind of south central. This is a bomb of a low pressure system, 993 there over Louisiana. I'm sure severe weather and thunderstorms would be a big factor in here. But not only that, we get this kind of Midwest snowfall into the Great Lakes, and watch it play out. It turns into a very massive snowstorm for, again, the central states into the Midwest, Great Lakes, and even some of the Ohio Valley on the tail end. And then Canada really gets slammed by it as well. And that's just before we get more cold air moving in here at the end of the model run, where we end off kind of similarly to the European model. It's a different day here, February 1st, but we get some low pressure in the Gulf, some snowfall over the south central states, and a pretty decent jet stream here. If any of this could get latched up, we would be in business. But again, as I always say, this is about 15 days out. This is probably not even going to be the same setup by the next model run. But it's important to note that this model, as of the current data, is suggesting that more Gulf storms flaring up is going to prevail through the entire month of January, and that will lead to opportunities. I think that's your accurate takeaway from this model. Obviously, as we get further in, the specifics become a lot more blurry, but the broad vision, right? It's kind of like when you see a blurry image, but then you back up and kind of look at the full picture, it becomes clearer. I think that's a perfect analogy, actually. That's kind of how we try to dissect this long range. Now, let's go ahead and just move into the total precipitation. Again, it's going to look a little underwhelming. This is the European model, the one that slams a lot of these areas in here. It's not necessarily above average, and a lot of the activity goes offshore, but just enough of it lines up to lead to snowfall in many instances in these areas. When we look at the anomalies, I mean, it's below average unless you're in the Rockies or in Florida. Maybe even, Cape Cod, they're getting a little bit of above average activity, but for the most part, drier. But you don't need it. You don't need the above average precipitation, because if everything matches up right, we end up with this, basically. The Gulf Coast and Southeast Coast, I know it's just a few inches, up to maybe 6 that this model's outputting, but we all know that for the Gulf Coast and for areas along coastal Georgia, South Carolina, this would be a massive snow system for them. This is like, very, very rare. So that is a big deal down there. And then we end up with totals after all the storms are said and done. We'd really be measuring it in the feet for the Mid-Atlantic, Ohio Valley, Northeast here. So really a beautiful look. And then the Rockies end up with quite a lot as well, as we've been kind of predicting. Even the Cascades kind of hopping back on the snow train, which is good news for them. The only mountain range that's struggling is the Sierra Nevada here at this point for this model run. As we zoom into the east, we get a little bit of a clearer vision into the amounts. And again, 1 to 2 feet in a lot of these areas, so that's kind of be your bullseye. And I know there's a lot of people in, like, well, DC's seen some, but Philadelphia I get a lot of comments from. New York City, Southern New England I get many comments from. I know that all of you would really love this solution. You guys have been in a snow drought, and I'm really cheering for you guys, so my fingers are crossed for this solution. It is a really good sign. Obviously, again, there is a lot of differences once we move beyond kind of like the 5, 6, 7 day range. So anything goes. It could change, but this is a really good sign as of now, and there's plenty of storm signals. There's going to be plenty of cold, so I would feel optimistic if I was a snow lover up in that area, those areas for the most part. Really, really looking very extreme for the New England area, like 2, 3 feet in a lot of these areas. So a lot of snowfall over the next 2 weeks is what this model is currently showing. When we look at the GFS, there is some similarities. It is a little less for some of these areas in here. We're looking much more in line with like 10, 15, maybe 20 inches in some of these areas after they're said and done. The Midwest storm into the Great Lakes really slams here. We see 1 to 2 feet from that one storm. So that would be a massive storm. The main elephant in the room is the no snow in these areas where the European model is showing the very rare snow. So we are not by any means locked into that yet. We need to see some agreement, and we need to get a little bit closer, but I'd rather have the European model on my side than the GFS one, if I'm being honest. But I always say it, the European model's right like 6 to 7 times out of 10, and then the GFS model's right like 3 to 4 times out of 10. But you never know when it's one of those 3 to 4 times where the GFS model's just going to nail it. So a lot of people are like, why do you even show it if it's not the best model? Well, it's not the best based on percentages, but there is those times where it's completely correct. So I feel it very important to show every day with you guys. When we zoom in, again, much more in line with like 10, 15, 20 inches in a lot of these areas as opposed to the 2+ feet, but still, I don't think anybody would be complaining in these areas that have been longing for snowfall, and certainly not the Midwest and Ohio Valley and Great Lakes. If you're hoping for snow, this is a great, great outlook for you guys. Obviously, the Deep South depends if you're cheering for it or not, but this is drastically different than the European model for sure. Looking at the temperatures, again, much colder looking, not only for next week, but as we move beyond that. We've been kind of tackling these models showing warmth at the end of the model runs every single day. Basically, it'll be pushed back a day further, but now we don't even see it. We end both these models with very cold conditions. So let's just walk through it. We're cold right now. We do warm up here again 18th, 19th briefly in the east before we get this massive Arctic outbreak starting Monday. Extremely cold. I don't want to understate this because the blues are already below average there. The greens are what we would consider to be far below average at 10 to 15 degrees below normal. Those purplish blues, which are over the plains, mostly in the Midwest here, that is 15 to 25 degrees below average. So that's like far, far below average. And then the magentas is probably what I would consider to be extremely below average temperatures. And we see these extremely below average temperatures widespread throughout a lot of the United States here. This is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, goes back to kind of just far below average, it's going to feel like a warm-up. But really, when you're looking at this, I mean, it's hard to even call that a warm-up. By Friday the 24th, we do get a little bit of brief warm temperatures over the Midwest, Great Lakes, and Northeast before this model says the 27th, another extreme Arctic outbreak is going to take place for the 29th, 30th, 31st. I mean, when is the end? Where is it on this model run? Because I'm not seeing it. Warm prevails out west. Cold prevails in the east and north central states. And we really would end January on an extremely cold note. If this verified, we would deepen the already, like I mentioned in the beginning of the video, the already very far below normal temperatures would cross a line of much further, where we would push those even further below average if this verified for the end of the month. Crazy stuff. GFS model, we're going to see some really good agreement. I mean, we get that brief warm up, severely below normal temperatures here, a little less severe, but really we're still talking about 20, 30 degrees below normal, so it's not going to make a huge difference. Again, a little brief warm up before we cool down again here. And then we're seeing another massive Arctic blast here for the 29th, 30th, 31st, just like the European model. And this is the end of the model run on February 1st. Warm in the west, clearly, and very cold here in the east. This is just not looking like we're going to see a warm-up before February as of now. Crazy, crazy stuff. Anyway, thank you so much for watching this video, guys. Be sure to subscribe and stay tuned with us. We're going to be uploading every single day and obviously dissecting all of these things. The warm-up will come eventually. We can't stay cold forever, but I do not see when that is yet. There is signs that February could be warmer, but we keep pushing that back, and it keeps looking a little less warm and impactful. So we'll see what transpires. Multiple snowfall threats. I'm sure we're not going to stop talking about the snow throughout the entire month of January. So very exciting times ahead. You can even hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload so you never miss one. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy it. Leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.